All right. Good morning from chilly Minneapolis. um, all right. So, where to start? So, I've been thinking a lot about heretics and heresy, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot about. I've been thinking about how it relates to, hey, Chad, how it relates to this little corner. And it's something that I've thought a lot about, hey, Teo. Uh, Throughout my whole Christian life, adult life, probably, it's something that comes up a lot. There's a number of things that I want to bring in as things that are influencing my perspective on this and what I'm thinking about. What's up, Matthew? And oh, jeez. I was going to mute my phone. I feel like this happens every time I start this. All of a sudden, yeah, amen, brother. I agree with this. So, like, one of the things that we've discovered. So my church experience, my negative church experiences, and how I've ended up in orthodoxy, and a lot of the conversations that I've had throughout my whole evolution of what I would say is the evolution of my understanding of my faith, right, has been tied to heresy and these distinctions of in and out and boundaries, and it's tied to Paul's video that he had, naming is framing, what's in a name, the name of the rose, Umberto Eco, a lot of different things. And uh, part of that is tied to my big critique all the time that I talk about with confessionalism, and that what confessionalism is akin to propositionalism, which is rooted in like a foundationalism philosophically. So like it's that most knowledge, Michael Polanyi, most knowledge is propositional and it's conscious, and it's how you self-identify and relate to certain sets of ideas. But even that sets of ideas, what is a set of ideas? What are the core? People will talk about the essential beliefs, the sets of ideas that you have to believe, right? Well, that's a set. That's a set is a boundary. So it's boundedness, and it's in and out, this dynamic of in and out. And often I've thought about these things in terms of like a cell. If you think about biology and you look at a cell and a cell membrane, cells have what's called it's called a semi-permeable membrane, and you have like exotosis and wouldn't be exotosis, and then in endotosis. No, that wouldn't be it. That's endoplasm. I don't know. I'm forgetting the words, but things have to move in and out of the cell, right? Or like Peterson will talk about the hero's journey. Is you live in the walled garden, the protected, bounded, walled garden. But then the hero's journey sometimes is to go outside that walled garden. Or you'll be cast outside where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth or something. Outside is where it's unsafe. And think about this in terms of like, you could even think about this at your house. Like right now it's below zero and wind chill. The boundary of the walls of this house, safety, right? And then outside is not safe. It's cold. You'll die if you don't have the correct garments, Yeah, cell membranes. Gavin, absolutely. But there's always a balance with this, right? Things need to go in and out, or else things die. You could set siege to an old castle if they don't have a well inside, because people have to go out to get water. But even like that's what a siege is you close off the cell membrane in such a way so much that like you don't let things in and out, and eventually that will die. It's very, very hard to make a walled garden, a castle, or something that is completely self-sustaining from inside. You could say that, like, depending on the amount of time, it's almost borderline impossible. And so at some point, things need to come in and out. A lot of this is tied to Peugeot's ideas of the center and the periphery, right? Gleaning the edges. On the edge of a map, there are chaos monsters, there are heretics, there are scary things on the outside, and the inside, the periphery, the center is safety, is what order and chaos, known and unknown. But those things, I think, what you can call it the identity of identity and non-identity, you can call it the Tao. There is a reciprocity in a relationship between those two things. And very often, the thing that you thought was the center, those things can flip and they can be inverted, and the relationship is changes. And so, what and part of this is connected to like a body, both a corporeal body, a physical body. Like we think not in the materialist frame, but like my physical body is a boundary. But when you really, if you really think about it, and you really start to think about where the lines and the limitations of this body, it becomes fuzzier, and a lot of it is the George MacDonald thing, that quote from Lilith, right? Like, you don't really understand these things. You just think you understand these things because you're familiar with them. Like, I'm very familiar with my own body. But if you really start to, but a lot of that's narrative. A lot of that's a story that I'm telling myself. If you really start to analyze what is my body and think about it and break it down, you start to realize, like, I don't really know what my body is. I just have a narrative for what my body is. Yeah, a canonization of the French. So I'm working toward this. He probably wouldn't, but I'm more of a boundary chaos monster than Peugeot is, and I think part of the, so this is kind of where I'm going. What's up? What's up, sourdough? Yeah, theological triage, first, second, third level doctrines, thicker walls. Yeah, and you maybe should have thicker walls. There's certain things. There are things that I am more confident in. There's essentially nothing that I'm certain of, because certainty to me is like the absolute closed wall. Like, absolute certainty is the absolute closed wall, which is dead. That's objectivism. That's where the world becomes a world of dead objects and nihilism. Like, if you think you're certain about things, you do not yet know as you ought to know. And this is why I came up with that kind of Lukeism a long time ago, that Twitter tweet, like, you can't reason with a rationalist that rationalism is irrational, because it is. But if you're a rationalist, you're in the closed circle of the serpent and you can't see outside of it, or you can't think your way out of a prison made of thought, is another Lukeism that I love. So, or it's not a Lukeism. It's I got it from this guy, Krishna Das. Anyhow, I heard it a long time ago, but it's excellent. So, let's start to make it about this little corner. I could keep illustrating a body, breath, air. You need air. Like, if you don't have air, this body, if the breath isn't coming in from the outside, you die pretty quick. If food isn't coming in from the outside, you die pretty quick. And where are those boundaries and limitations? And it's very akin to like what we've learned from the mycorrhizome, the fungal network underneath everything, that everything's kind of interconnected in almost kind of an avatar kind of a way. The more we know, it's the Wood Wide Web is a great illustration of this. But every body is that way. So that's my body. Now let's think about other bodies. Let's think about spiritual bodies, pattern bodies, abstract bodies, these non-physical bodies. America, Uncle Sam, Santa Claus. Peugeot talks about a lot of these things. Are they real? Are they not real? This little corner of the internet. The internet, yeah, it has neural networks, and my mind, which again, like the internet, it's like the internet. There's a brain, but there's also my mind. So the internet has a bunch of wires connecting things, but it's also something else. These things that are caught up in the zeitgeist, the spiritual realm, like potential and being, mind body, like these two distinctions, like they are two dualisms of a larger unity. So let's think about this little corner of the internet. I would argue this little corner of the internet, and particularly the Paul Vanderklay segment of it, which I think Neil with an A, said in his conversation with Chad and Tyler the other day, that the way that he spoke about it was really good. He thinks the little corner of the internet is really the PBK corner of the internet, because that's the relational, that's the community side of it. Because Peugeot has symbolic world, Vervaeke has the Vervaeke foundation, but those are more like, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, if Peugeot was trying to say he's trying to form community, he said explicitly, I think he's not trying to form community. So then it's just like, I don't know what it is. It's like a thought group. I don't know. I have strong convictions about relational ontology, which I'm like, you better be trying to form community. That's what makes something be. And I think this little corner is something. But like, okay, here's where I want to go with it. Um, I'm clarifying a couple things that I want to bring in before I open this up. This little corner of the internet started because PVK got into Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson was starting a quickening. He was starting to revivify and quicken, I would say, the religious intellectual thinking in a way that that was not happening in traditional institutional bodies of the churches. You know, we keep talking about this stuff all the time. Like, how come he can fill stadiums and churches are empty? Because the church thing is dead and people aren't interested in it, largely, and increasingly so over time. Secularity, post-Christendom, ex-evangelicalism, all that stuff. But yet now people are becoming re-interested in religion because of Peugeot, and then PVK is talking about that in a specifically religious context that is largely Christian, but also includes Judaism and I wish more self-identifying atheists and stuff. Like I just spoke to Joey yesterday, and part of the reason he doesn't participate anymore is because this thing has become too Christian, too explicitly Christian. It feels too much like the thing that it was at first an antidote for, right? So like, this is one of my, you could call it a fear or concern that I have with this little corner of the internet, particularly the PVK section of it, is that I don't want this thing turning into the thing that it was an antidote for, that it was a solution for. Because this is what often happens. Like in our fear and our safetyism to want to hold on to this thing and to set up boundaries and borders and make it a walled garden, because what, it's chaos. It's scary. Like, what is it? Chill. And I know, like, part of that is my temperament. Like, I'm very comfortable in chaotic environments. Like, you could change my structure, you could change a lot of things about my life, and I'm probably not gonna be too unsettled. It's just kind of the way that I wire, that I'm wired, and that I operate. And also slow growth. That's how slow growth happens that way. Like something that grows. The parable of the seeds. Neil talked about the parable of the seeds the other day. A lot of this is seed throwing. Jordan Peterson's throwing out seeds. PVK's throwing out seeds, and then what happens is like they need to grow up in other consciousness in order to bear fruit and to be. Otherwise, like, who brought that up in there? Tayo was talking about like grinding up seeds, because that's the thing. Like, you have a bunch of sunflower seeds, you grind it up, you have sun butter. You can eat that; it's delicious. But guess what? How does that seed bear much more fruit? You take the seeds, instead of grinding them up and having somebody eat them one meal, you plant them in the ground. They grow up into plants that produce many more seeds. Fractal replication. Like, that should be the goal of whatever this little corner of the internet it is. And because that requires like this kind of fractal emergence, and that's emergence and emanation. A seed going into the ground and dying and bearing fruit is emanation and emergence. It's the spiritual top entity going down and then fractally living out in all these different ways. And I was talking to Joey about this the other day, and I was saying, so this gets into exclusion and inclusion. I am convinced, and there's a David Bentley Hart article in the thing that really helped me clarify my thinking on this. The article is kind of is a criticism of a certain strain of Calvinism talking about election, and he would say like election biblically is not election. It's not exclusionary election for like an absolute election, like this good, this bad, forever, the end, like in a binary way. He says the biblical motif for election is always election for something, because that's always the question you have to ask. Elect for what? What's the purpose of election? What's the telos of election? It's not just like election apart from. It's election for further inclusion. So like you can have a walled garden, but it's not. If you have an elect walled garden, that walled garden is dead, because if it's an eternal, unending duration of time election, then it has no relationship to what is outside, and it's a dead monad. It doesn't exist. It will cease to exist. It's objectivism, nihilism, death. Biblical election can't be like that, winners and losers. It can't be. And David Bentley Hart really walks us through. So it's always election for something. Walk through the Bible. Abel's elect, right? Why? Why is he elect? Because God doesn't like Cain? What's going on there? Abraham's elect. Why? Just because God likes Abraham and damn everyone else, screw everybody else? No. Abraham is elect for something. In order to, you have to elect something. You have to discern. You have to choose to be in the world, to exist. It's necessary. But it doesn't have to be an arbitrary binary. I tried to combine those two words in my head as I was speaking them, and it didn't work. It's not an arbitrary binary. Again, this has always been my problem with arbitrary election. God chooses, like how a lot of Calvinists will talk about Romans 9. Like, Esau have I loved, or Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. So like, I love Jacob, screw Esau. Is that the biblical story? Is that what's going on? Or is Jacob elect for something? Abraham is elect. David is elect. Why? For the blessing of the nations. It's always it's always election for future inclusion. Election is also boundedness. It's discernment. It's the same thing. But there's a difference between discernment and like an absolutizing judgment, right? Where it's just like, this thing is, and I think this is an area I need to improve, is discernment, making some boundaries. And I think this is helpful for me to make boundaries, because when you make boundaries in this way, they're not absolute. Because that's always my fear as an ENFP, as a 4, as somebody who's very open, like whatever, 95th, 4th, 6th% openness. I don't like closing off potential in the future. I'm not kind of like, this is why I'm against confessionalism. I'm not a safetyist. There are all different forms of safetyism, and safety and liberty, freedom, are inversely proportional. Like, if you increase safety, you're decreasing liberty. If you increase liberty, it's not as safe. What do you want? Where are the boundaries between that? And yes, you should make discernments. You should live in the world. You should make boundaries there, but you cannot cement them and absolute them in time, or else you get into this Orwellian thing. What you get into, your life becomes death. Your safety becomes danger. Like, that's the Tao. What you intend, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And this is even my fear of that, even my fear of the people who are more like conservative, safety-ish people in TLC, who want to put in hard lines, hard boundaries in a way which is turning this whole thing, again, that is an antidote from back into the thing that it was a remedy for, right? Or it was a remedy for this disease. And then they're like, oh no, it's scary now, it's bad. And like, what's happening with it? Let's turn it back into the disease. No. That's an error that conservative people love to make, and it's a mistake. So, what's up, Chezi? You are a total mensch. How do I say that? You're great. And the way you handled the conversation yesterday was fantastic. I look up to you, and the divine spark in you is strong. The force is strong in you, and you are a wonderful human being. So, slow growth. Cancer grows fast. Fools rush in. I'm learning this at my local estuary level. Like, and I spoke about that the other day. I think everybody needs to just chillax and calm down and learn to love. Again, it's the husbandry thing. It's the gardening thing. I'm fine with emanation. I'm fine with ideas. I'm fine with discernment. I'm fine with putting boundaries, putting up lattices, adding some structure, getting containers, defining things. That's all fine. But if you go too hard that direction, you will be. This is like with COVID. Also, people. So, well, I probably just like triggered YouTube, and like we'll put disclaimers on this. Sometimes your cure will be worse than the disease. This is my problem with interventionism. Is like if you get into intervention, if you want to start intervening in things and prescribing things and fixing things, maybe your fix will be worse than maybe the unintended side effects, the things that you don't see in your solution will be worse than the problem you're trying to fix. I think that's hard. That's a scary thing. What are some of the other things that I put in my thing that I wanted to address? Uh, there's a great Greg Boyd, Frank Viola article on there on heresy because they essentially it's kind of the adverbial versus adjectival thing. A heretic is one who divides, one who causes, who seeks, that's a schismatic, somebody who breaks a body, whose goal is to break apart a body. And to some degree, these things aren't volitional. Like they went out from us because they were not of us. Why did they leave? Because they weren't part of the body. So that's why they left. That happens a lot in the TLC. A lot of times people leave. Uh, I would argue that a lot of people leave TLC because they're colonizers and they want to insist on their own way and direct and prescribe and control because of their safetyism and their fear what everybody else is doing. And when they find out they can't do that, because again, this is a remedy from the whole flippin' world that's doing that. TLC doesn't do that. We don't kick out Sam Tiedemann, the heretic. We don't kick out the Jews. We don't. Hopefully, we create a space that's hospitable and welcoming for the self-identifying atheist. This is a remedy for identitarianism. Let's not turn it back into identitarianism, please. And so, because again, like when you do that, you are being the heretic, even if you're Orthodox. Again, like you can be right and be wrong, or be wrong and be right. You can be an Orthodox heretic. Like, what's that? That's a Peter Rollins book, isn't it? The Orthodox Heretic? I think that's what the name of one of his books is. See, like Peter Rollins understands this stuff at like a high level intellectual thing, but most people don't understand what the hell he's saying. Okay, there's people giving me some criticisms here, and so I want to go back and go through some of these comments, and then I'll open this up. What else was in my? I also do think. Well, last thing, I also do think that this is a. I think something new and novel and innovative is happening here in this online space. This is what I was getting at in the Gutenberg 2.0 thing. Having the printing press changed the world. And like, were there bad things with that? Yes. But like, that's what happens. There's a fall. And Joseph gets sold into slavery in Egypt. Is that bad? We'll see. Is it bad? And yes. But like, is it bad ultimately? No. Gutenberg and the Protestant Reformation, the Enlightenment, is that good? Yay, kind of. But then it's kind of bad, and there's these unintended side effects, and then God redeems it for good, and like it's part of just it's part of being that is the transformation that's happening for individuals and for society and for cultures. It's happening at all these levels, and so like the internet, long form conversations, people being able to talk across the oceans and do this and be in this kind of space. Like, what is this? Is this good? Kind of. Is it bad? Sure. What's going to happen? I don't know. Let the seeds fall and let the growth happen. There's rocky soil. There's fast sprouting growth, which the sun comes and it withers out and it dies, right? And then there's good soil, and the seed falls on good soil and it brings forth much fruit. Let's give enough time to discern that. Okay. Okay. What are we talking about? Going back. How far back do we want to say? Relational. He's right. Nate, I think you're talking about me, and that would be correct. Yes. Are you talking about me? You just watch with the sound off? Okay. John's work on relational ontology is incredible. Yeah, and like John will probably lay that out in a really technical way, which is great, but I fully agree. I've been arguing for relational versus substance ontology for a long time, but then the substance is the bounded part of that. But again, like it can't be a forever, eternally bound thing. because otherwise you're dealing with, there's always an implicit relationship between any sort of substance, you know. Neil's here. Neil, you're back. That conversation with Neil and Chad and Ty was fantastic. There's some really great. I really love too, Neil, your illustration of like the seeds growing up and what's happening here, and then the trees are interweaving and talking. Like the trees are becoming alive, or like the Ents or something, you know. Let's see. Can relational ontology exist without Christ? No, I mean, I think. Well, this. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that. I would say no as a Christian, but like the. I don't want to go in the weeds on that one. Sorry. Because that would be a whole other thing. Ty, what's clear is this thing was seen by different people as a solution for different things. Yeah, so I started listening to this. I am listening to the Vervaeke Peterson conversation, and it's good. I mean, it's highly technical. Like it's the kind of thing. This has always been my problem with Vervaeke and why I lean into the personal side, even the Paul Vanderklay side, because even though I like talking about ideas, listen to me talk about all this stuff. I like philosophy. You know, at some point you're going to need a trickle down effect. You know, like there's a lot of people in my life and in my history that, you know, that's like Chinese for them, or like hieroglyphics or something. They're just like what Vervaeke is talking about is never going to be understood by certain people. It's like, and it's fine. It's fine. But like you have to relate that you need things that work at every level, you know? I have never done that. I'm sure you have, Grim, because you like to go deep into that kind of stuff. Let's see. Okay, let me go just toward the. I should just put the invite in here, shouldn't I? And then people come in and talk, and I can keep reading comments, and then we can start playing and talking. Nate, it'd be cool if you come in. We just need to just schedule a talk some flipping time. It's ridiculous that we haven't spoken in this long. Like, no, this is totally true, right? I sent and this is stuff that you know, honestly, I think a lot of people don't understand. Like, I was getting into it and getting really annoyed in conversations, and you know, I love you guys, but like Sam, my friend Sam, and Trip Parker, Sam Tiedemann and Trip Parker, I sent them some Jordan Daniel Wood thing that came out on Love Unrelenting the other day about universalism, and I thought it was fantastic by Jordan Daniel Wood, because I always think everything he does is fantastic, and they just had all these problems with it, and they're just like, it's disingenuous for a Catholic to be an universalist, and I'm just like, but that's what he's talking about in the whole thing of why it's not disingenuous, because he was saying, you know, like you can walk all the way through church history and like this thing was anathematized and heretical, and then all of a sudden it becomes the orthodoxy later, you know. Maximus is that way, you know, like they cut off his hand so he can't write, cut out his tongue so he can't talk, and then he's dead, but now it's like now Maximus is a saint and he's orthodox. So like that always happens. Like that's what I'm talking about. That's the boundaryness that I'm talking about. If you were to make those boundaries eternal realities, unquestionable, unchanging realities, that dynamic wouldn't happen. That's what I'm talking about. You have to allow for the dynamism of faithful innovation. David Bentley Hart's book on tradition and apocalypse is that. That's what a living tradition is it's something that's allowed to be faithful to what has come before, but also innovate and potentially correct or alter or change what has come before. But I think, you know, conservatives don't like that. But like, you don't realize your conservatism is based on that. That's like some comment made, like the orthodoxy stands on the backs of heretics, you know? What up, Gavin?
Hey, Luke, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah.
What you drinking?
Coffee.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you use cream?
I do not, because it's an intermittent fasting thing.
Yeah.
You know, so when I get
Any
cream,
sugar? Black coffee? Any sugar? Anything?
No, sugar would be worse than cream, man.
Is it?
Oh, dang it. Nate, get back here. 8:50. Yes. I willed you to come back. Anyhow,
Hello.
I know
Hey,
you don't
Nate.
have a lot of time. So
No, I don't. But
how about you drop all your wisdom?
what would you like me to address? Like I can tell you, like the question that you got about um, whether relational ontology depends on Christ is like I can answer that. That's like a badly formed question because
Do it.
Christ as a person is a hypostasis, and persons are relational by their nature. So Christ is the relation behind the relations. Like the whole idea behind a relational ontology is that the relations are prior to the things related. There can't be like there's no like that's the Trinity of which he is one of the persons. So it's the question assumes that it assumes that Christ is a substance. I think, which is well, that's the whole point of relational ontology is that substance isn't primary.
Yes.
So, yeah.
There's
So
always
that-
a unity behind any distinction. Like whatever you're seeing and naming, there's something behind it.
Right.
Always.
Yeah.
The relation.
Right. And it's a relational and being a relational unity, it's a multi-unity.
Yeah.
So not an absolute monad.
Yeah. What do you think about the idea of, I mean, I'm sure I would like you to just riff in your own language because I've been riffing in my own about this bodied boundedness, in and out, election for inclusion. But like, I mean, does it make sense to you? I'm sure
Yeah,
it does.
I think
The hard-walled garden doesn't work. It's dead.
yeah, I would say this. Well, the thing I always want to say about God, like God's election or the idea of God choosing, is that God does elect and God does choose, and that it is always affirmative. It is always affirmative. It is affirmative from the point of view of God, but we may not see it as affirmative.
Okay. Can you give a specific?
Yeah, sure. Let's see here. I would say the creation. The act of creation itself
Is election. Yeah. It's
is
this.
election.
Totally.
My heart is beating right now. Does that matter that my heart is beating? Does that mean I'm elected, that my heart is beating?
Yeah, you exist.
To life.
Right.
Yeah.
You've been brought into being by God.
Yes.
Right. I made it. I'm still here.
But that doesn't, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that there's not hell to go through.
Totally. Grim, I apologize. Grim says, I got to read the comments you're talking about for the people who are just listening or it's confusing. I can see how that would be.
Do you have a hard time? It's for me, it's impossible, like, to keep up with the comments.
Well, it kind of is. The only way that I can, because like if I'm just doing my Mosaic Vision morning circumambulating riffing, I can't read them. So I'd be going back and forth.
That's what I think. Much. Like both you and I tend to be like very stream of consciousness, intuitive in the way we. So it's really hard when you're doing that, and to also be able to have the focus. Especially, I think I don't know if I have ADD or what, but I find it an impossible task to be able to follow the comments while I'm also trying to like formulate a stream of consciousness to talk.
Yeah,
it's just
like I have to like what I'm doing right now. I find the more people that come on to chat, the easier it gets for me because I kind of do the half listening, kind of like if I'm multitasking throughout the day listening to podcasts, like I'm not fully giving my attention to something. But if I'm just riffing my own or having a one-on-one conversation, I can't do that because I have to be fully present to do the thing that I want to be doing. Because a conversation is even like this. That's another piece I want to bring in actually.
I think Graham is interesting. He's just like pull up his comment that he just made.
Well, and this is the one that's related to it, which I think is true. Because, like, Grim, what I've been talking about is, like, some of y'all are going to hell. Yes, but why? I've just been talking about this whole time that it's not an absolute bounded,
And how
y'all are
long?
going to hell.
So I think that here's the
thing.
interesting thing. Grim is so interesting because Grim is obviously not remotely orthodox in what he thinks and believes at all, or traditionally Christian. However, he's so culturally evangelical that, like, there are people that listen to him that would never listen to me or my channel. That are perfectly comfortable over there because he keeps the framing that they're comfortable with.
Look at that. Okay, good for you. Thanks, Tim. Yeah. Well, in the hell topic, there's so much. I talk about hell a lot, right? And we've talked about hell a lot. It's just I feel like I'm always talking about hell, and then I'll just read comments. And I suppose this is because, like, not all these people are obsessed with me and, like, listen to everything that I've said, but I see all these comments about hell all the time, and I'm just like,
well, I still think you need to keep talking about hell because there's obviously confusion. Like, take for example,
like this. Yes.
Take for example, Sam and Tripp's reaction to your sharing Jordan Daniel Wood's "Love Unrelenting" video, which I actually tweeted. And tagged him in, and then I also shared a bit from Tom Berg's letter on justice.
Yeah. Yep.
And the thing is I think that people don't know what universalism actually is when they react like that.
It's pretty much always a misunderstanding. I've never come across someone who would articulate my understanding of Christian universalism, who rejects it. I don't think I've ever come across
it. Right. And for, like, I want to address the Catholic thing specifically. Like, to not be, like, there's no, like, as a Catholic, you pretty much have to be, like, I would say almost as a Christian, like, I'm gonna expand this beyond Catholic. You cannot be a Christian and not at least be a hopeful universalist. If you are not at least a hopeful universalist, you're a diabolist. By definition. Because that means that there are some people you actually want to go to hell.
No, I completely agree with this.
Which is diabolical.
Yes. I think to not be a hopeful universalist, you ultimately, which is so interesting with all the Cal conversations I've been having, I think to not be a hopeful universalist, you essentially, there's people you don't want to forgive.
Right.
And so, like, how can you say the Lord's Prayer? How can you be a Christian? This is what you're saying. Yeah.
You don't want to forgive everyone, therefore you don't want God to forgive everyone, and you don't want real Christianity. You want this false version of Christianity that is really just another form of idolatry of power that makes you psychologically comfortable to continue to act in the world the way you do.
Yeah, so. I completely agree, and I just don't. Sometimes that's so clear to me. But yet I always try to be, again, the boundaryness. I try to be relationally open because, like, that's my masculine understanding of things. But then when other people disagree with me, I try to have that feminine openness to just be like, okay, what don't I see? But then I get to the place of being like, am I crazy or are you crazy? What is happening?
No, but like, that's good. You have the space. Okay, so you have to have the space to listen to people to figure out, like, why they think that way. So you have to give them this space to listen to them to get to it. And you know what? Sometimes there's a really dark reason why they end up, like, and I don't mean dark on their part, like something that's happened to them that makes them, like, not being willing to let go of justice.
Right.
In an absolute and definitive sense.
Right. It's the kind of hurt people. Mick Moe is such a just, like, shorthand genius. Like, he is a total poet because it is this thing. Like, that's a way to say what we're talking about. The older brother couldn't join the party. Yeah. He couldn't forgive, and he was excluded. The one who did all the right things was excluded in the outer darkness.
Right.
He couldn't forgive.
Well, yeah, but he saw the father's actions as unjust.
But isn't that kind of the case?
He thought his own sense of justice was what was more refined than the father's was.
Yes.
Doesn't that mean that people go to hell and choose to go there and stay there because they won't forgive? So like
Yes.
him not being with the Father, like, so there is a hell and people are there, but it's a lot of it is like if they could get out of there if they were forgiving,
Yes.
but because they're not, they're there. It's like, and it's cause and effect. It's like causal. Because God's not going to force you into heaven. Like, he's not going to force you to go. He's not going to force you to forgive people.
Yes, I completely agree with everything you just said. It's just that ultimately, and this is why I'm this is why I call myself an explicit universalist versus just a hopeful universalist, is I don't think God's reality of creation is one where your ability to choose against your own good supersedes your actual good.
Well, and also I would just say this, it's like God is so unbelievably beautiful and attractive that once all the false has been burned away, like there's it's just like, if you think that it's possible to resist, if you think it's possible to resist God forever, you haven't begun to understand what God is. That's what I would say.
But you're assuming hell is bad.
No, I'm not.
Not ultimately.
I'm assuming it's actually for the purification of souls.
It's refining. Yeah.
Like, so,
and it may in fact and also, here's the thing. I will even give the infernalists this. Since God's act of creation is an eternal act, and I don't think that God's act of making persons is ever going to cease, there may never be a time when hell is in fact empty.
Right.
I mean, I would think so.
It depends on whether you have a vision of the eschaton that involves stasis or some kind of repeated stasis or something.
You didn't read what Hezi said.
What did he say?
Oh, I didn't know if you were responding to Hezi or if you were...
No, I wasn't. I didn't see it at all.
No, this is totally right. I mean, there are levels of understanding, and some are seen as heretical at different levels. But that's very in line with like my understanding of spiral dynamics and what you see and hear. Like, it depends, at this level of the spiral, and they're all related because they're all kind of circles. But like here, you're going to just be like, well, that's bad and evil. This is also the Chinese farmer thing. But then all of a sudden you'll go through a death and rebirth and a resurrection, and all of a sudden you'll come back.
That was related to what I was saying. That was related to saying about what I was saying about election too, because sometimes when God is elected, I guess it doesn't look like election to us.
Yeah, suffering, like the cross, maybe.
Exactly. Right. Yes, precisely.
Yeah, sometimes heaven looks like hell, and hell looks like heaven. You can't know what it is. It's hard to identify it.
Because at the highest level, all those distinctions again pass away because there's a relational unity behind all those distinctions: right and left hand of God, sheep and goats, heaven and hell. Mm-hmm. Like there's something behind all that.
And there's like a journey and a period of time. It's like you might go down into hell for a period of time, right?
Right.
Temporarily.
All right, McMo, what do we say here? If hell is being without God, it is almost an arenic kenosis. God, number one, empties himself. I mean, to me, that's like, well, I don't want to start talking about, like, there's all these things from the liturgy.
I know, I'm not, there. That one, I would almost want to have him here to clarify what he means.
Yeah.
Because it's not clear what being, because of the way that sentence is constructed, it's not clear whether he uses a lowercase.
It's poetry
on being, but it's not clear from the way he formulates it that it's not meant to actually be capital B, being. In which case, that becomes very interesting, because then he would be contrasting the possibility of like a kind of like being in the as the absolute given in the way that like a materialist would accept it, versus being as absolute gift in the way that a religious person would think about it. And he's putting them in direct contrast.
Yeah. I will not clarify, he says. But givenness, I love, so Ken Lowry, I brought this up on previous live streams. This this has been something that's going to stick with me. Like, I will remember it, because he said he thinks of determinism as just givenness. And I'm like, that's such a helpful way to think about what looks like the election determined reality of God. It's just like you are given.
Yeah, but givenness is a sham. There's no. It's.
What do you mean?
It's gift. It's not It's not givenness. It's gift.
What's the difference?
It's continual. One might even say it's continual election.
Yeah.
Which sustains everything.
Uh-huh.
It's not. So it's not given. It's gift. Because when you start thinking about it, because when okay, here's the difference. Okay, so when you see something as given, then it becomes your possession, and it ceases to be gift. So it cannot continue to process as gift because you've now claimed it as your possession. Oh, so there's a huge distinction between the given and the gift. So if you see reality as given, then you can seize it and grasp it for yourself. You can acknowledge that it may have came to you as a gift, but now it's given, so it's yours. Rather than receiving it as gift and then continuing to pass it along as gift and maintaining its giftedness.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I mean, it's like anything. Breathing, water, you drink it, but it doesn't. It's always a flow.
Yeah.
You know. For sure.
Right. Well, you dam up the flow when you see it as a given. And we do this all the time, by the way. That's what we're trying to do. And we do. We dam up the flow. That's why the world is fucked up.
Yeah, dams.
That's what fallenness means, is to take that which was gift and to treat it as given.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a clearful illustration, even like taking a river, right? And you dam up the river so you can use this, and you can create hydroelectric power, and you can do whatever, but just like it just jacks the whole ecosystem. Like, what are the unintended side effects of creating a dam?
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And they're not.
And then what do we do? To fix the problem? We'll just do something. We'll just take something else. We'll use our power in another way in order to fix the problem that we created in the first place.
Well, that's kind of that's the whole technological thing. It's that hideous strength in the unman, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we've destroyed the dead, silent planet with our technology and our sin and our fallenness. So then what? So then we'll just like build technology to go to other planets, so we can just continue our path of just like wreckage with fixing everything and all our technological solutions.
Yeah,
like just destroy the cosmos.
Y'all are trolling me.
well, I know you're more. But here's the thing, Gavin. So relationally, I very much value and don't want to exclude the people like you from my Consciousness Congress, because you are more bullish on technology. Right. I've been very Michael, lady, I brought that up a lot, has been correcting to my own isolated way of seeing these things. You know, like even doing this, I've become open to the idea that like I've suspended my absolute elected closed judgment on technology as like this.
Can I ask you a question, Luke?
I
think actually we'll get to the heart of this.
Yeah.
What's the difference between technology and the miracles of Christ? Because there's interesting, like sometimes it's interesting because sometimes he seems to almost use techne in his healings, right? There's like when he uses the mud and the spittle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so like Mick Mo is saying that start in a city or start in a garden, end in a city, but it's a gardened city, arguably.
you mind if I answer my own question since I got to go soon?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the difference is that one is created from a mindset of scarcity, trying to solve a problem of scarcity, and the other is done from a mindset of plenitude, trying to open people up to share in the plenitude that already is. And that makes them completely different. And so here's the thing. Here's what I would say in Gavin's favor. I believe that it is possible for us to begin to use our human sub creative capacity to turn our technology so that it is operating from that way of viewing the world in that mindset instead of reinforcing the scarcity mindset and attempting to overcome it. And I have to hop off because I got to get to work. All right.
Well, good to see you, Nate.
Yep.
Dude, thanks for jumping on. Always good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, man.
Made it. Okay.
Talk to you later.
Yep. So also, we'll have to clip this also. Are you leaving too? Or are you just waving?
I was just waving to Nate.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's Morning Talk put out a video or a live stream the other day about technology. I'll have to share this with him so he can reap. That's right. Put it in the clip stream.
Yeah, I was thinking during that part of the conversation, you had mentioned it would be nice if there were atheists here, and I was thinking, what would an atheist? Why would they want to be in this conversation?
Well, I think so.
Talking about hell and universalism.
No, granted. I don't know. That's why I wish. So I spoke with Joey the other day. You know, who I called him on the phone because he came up and I don't know. People always reference Joey, and I said as much to Joey too because Mark brought him up and Jacob brought him up, and they're just chatting of like, you know, it's kind of this romantic idea of like, well, everything was better when Joey was around, and Joey was a leader, and Joey made decisions, and that's all, you know, and whatever. That's all great. And I listen, and I like Joey, and I've had lots of conversations with Joey about people that were booted off BOM and people I wanted to bring back on and all this. Joey is, I really value Joey. Joey and I are very different, and we've had disagreements about things, but I've always been better. Joey's a perfect example of someone, it's like how to disagree, kind of. Joey's a great example, at least for me. And part of that is like, I trust Joey. I never think in Joey's disagreement with me, he's being mean or not really for me. Joey just doesn't really, we're really different people, you know? And so anyhow, Joey, I think he was just saying he said, number one, he doesn't want to do video conversations anymore because he just feels like a lot of it has become drama. He's just like, I don't want to engage in the drama. He's just like, it's not helpful for me personally.
And you're talking about like not recorded, perhaps. Just you could have video on, just don't record it and share it.
Totally.
Right.
And that's what like
that.
I'll probably call him on the phone and have regular conversations with him because I miss Joey in my life. Honestly,
that's
like,
good.
He's I've known him for a long time, and he really, because he's so different than me, it really adds a lot of value. I don't really have interest in groups where everybody's like me. Like it's just like I have enough problems with my own self-love. Like I get sick of myself.
I'm actually, the people in the corner that are most like me are the people I don't want to be around. Those are the ones that I want to be around the least. They because I see myself in them, and I see nasty parts of myself in them, and I don't like them. And it's really that I don't like me. It's a mirror.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of it. So. All right, Tim, Neil, what's up? Bad apple. Get in here and sour us all with your rottenness.
I don't know how much I have to offer, but I'll say that I mean, we're in one of these modes where we're talking about the TLC explicitly, which is always kind of, it's like the worst when we try to make everything that's just so obvious, like when you just think of it implicitly. Like obviously we're talking about God, like that's the whole point. We're talking about it from a lot of different perspectives, and that's the whole like beauty, is that we're like you can talk about God without saying God, because you're talking about meaning or purpose, or and as a Christian,
highest good, whatever.
Like the final end of all things is Christ, and we're like, the purpose of being a human is to travel towards that. But if you're an atheist, you're not going to say it explicitly that way. You're going to say it some other way. And the more we talk about it and try to explicitly name what the telos of this conversation is, the more it becomes cutting off heretics.
No, totally. That's why I've always been a mystical telos person. I agree there's a telos, but if you want to start naming it and putting a narrative on it and thinking that you have an encapsulated understanding of that telos, the thing that this again was a remedy for will turn into you're just going to go back to that whole thing. So I'm like, why do you want to turn this into the shit that we're all escaping from?
Yes, and I mean, it's so the older brother in the prodigal son, which I left I chatted a few streams ago that the older brother is just low time preference rebellion against God. It's you want the inheritance that's good at the end, not the one that's good right now. And when it's all about cutting off the younger brother from the part that you think you deserve, and that's unforgiveness and all of that. But I'm not very good at talking about things.
No, I think that's I'm totally tracking with you. I think that's I think that's the dynamic that's going on there. That's why all those parables of Jesus are so powerful, is because they're eternally fecund. How do you say, instead of fecundity, how do you say fecund? Is that how you say that? Why do I feel like a moron?
But I like to think of that parable as you look at it. If we stayed in that story, what would happen is the older brother would go and the younger brother would stay, and then the cycle would repeat, but the older brother is returning and the younger brother is resentful.
Yeah.
So, there is a golden mean. There's a royal path that you follow, but you can't, it can't be an algorithm or a heuristic even. It's just faith, and being in faith it's not something that you can make explicit, because it is inherently being related to God.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is probably true. Like, the older brother is jealous. I mean, isn't it amazing too? There's all these brothers, there's these pairs of two, goats, sheep, Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau. There's always these pairs, the prodigal, and you hear that a lot of times in Christianity, right? Which is this transactional relationship with God, where people are like, why am I doing all these right things? Why am I foregoing doing all the shit that I want to do? Cocaine off the stripper's ass or whatever, and going to church all the time. Like, if it's not ultimately giving me what I want, it's like, no. You're the whole game you're playing is the wrong game, man. It's not. That is life.
Yeah.
Obedience is life. That is the good. That is what you should want, but you don't even want to do that. So your rightness, your obedience is not obedience. The older brother was doing all the right things, right? But for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
He was right but wrong. Where the younger brother, the prodigal, was wrong but ultimately right. He was not lying to himself. He just gave himself to his short-term goals, but then he went all the way down the U-shaped journey to realize with the swine, well, this sucks. I followed that all the way down, like Solomon, the man of wisdom. I've done all this stuff, and it doesn't satisfy. And sometimes you got to do that, I don't know. I don't want to. I do. I think Coke would probably be a lot of fun, but I don't need it. Tim, you got stuff to say? Come in here and just tell us, give us the, Sherry, come on.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Bubby.
I don't have much to say on like what you guys were talking about. But I was struck with like a thought that I've been having for a while. Like when I was raised Catholic, I was taught that during the consecration of the Eucharist, something happens called the transubstantiation of the Eucharist, where the bread physically transforms into red blood cells, skin cells, dermis, fascia, whatever, of the body of Christ. And, we're all taught to believe this, but we're not really encouraged to ask any questions about it, right? And like if you were to approach a conversation about the Eucharist among, let's say, Catholic priests or Catholic bishops, in the way that you conducted your conversation just moments ago about heaven and hell or whatever, I think you would be very quickly encouraged to stop that conversation. Because you're very quickly going to get to a place where you realize this is all nonsense, right? Like we're going on, and like I can prove it, right? It's like, think about the coronation of the King of England, right, as an event. And then think about let's say a second grader's ballet recital as an event. Think about the way that those events would be different. Well, you could infer from the way that the events take place that one event is a little more important than the other event, right? So think about this. Now think about like the event of the consecration of the Eucharist. This is the most important thing that can possibly happen on planet Earth, or at least as is stated in the Catechism, right? So I would then expect that the bread is baked by nuns, right? In a holy ritual, in a sacred kitchen, in the church. Do they do that? That would reinforce that this is a super important ritual, right? But they don't do that. They order wafers from a catalog that arrive at the church in a plastic bag, and it gets tossed on a counter somewhere, right? Because I've seen it. I used to work in churches, right? They just throw it like with junk, right? To be cleaned up later and organized or whatever, right? That's not how you treat something that's really, really super important, right? Like, and the fact that there is no ritual surrounding the consecration of the Eucharist, there is no reinforcement of sacredness or formalness, or like it tells me something about what people actually believe is happening here. And so like when you guys were talking about like heaven and hell, I was reminded that from 1988 until 2024, from my perspective, it was perfectly acceptable and encouraged to believe that hell was a physical place where some people would go, and you needed to do everything you could to make sure you didn't go there. And so I think it's kind of disingenuous to now be like, well, hell's not actually a real place. It's more of this concept that's supposed to help us figure things out.
But I'm not even saying that. Again, like I've never said hell isn't a real place.
But that's how these conversations have gone, at least the ones that I've been privy to, is that it's a moving away from this very harsh, mean, indefensible position to a much softer, more, let's say, marketable position, right?
Well,
and it just reminds me of the times over the course of history that Christianity has changed itself changed its core beliefs to match, to make itself more societally acceptable. And I don't think that this really looks any different than that, right?
Okay.
It's just another Christmas tree.
So, well, part of this is like my whole testimony and story. I mean, that's part of my intellectual deconstruction from things, is like what you just said. Like, you're basically saying, like, we moved away from infernalism, like that idea of hell, where it's just like merely punitive. God is a judge. He's angry, angry sky daddy. It's a real place. You burn, literal fire. Like that whole idea. Part of my whole deconstruction was realizing like that isn't the teaching of the universal church since the beginning. It's just not. It's a very narrow teaching that evolved in the Latin West and has like its worst version in like Calvinist, Jonathan Edwards kind of theology. Like the East and the West have always been very different. That's a main difference between the Eastern Church and the Western Church, is that the Western Church is very judicial and legal, punitive, like punishing crimes, breaking of laws, and you make punishments, versus the East, the church is a hospital for sick people where they can be healed. Like that's just, it's always been that way. I just never knew that because I grew up in the West. So like what is hell is, this is part of the whole point of like saying somebody like me is a heretic. Yeah, from your super narrow, exclusivist, insular tradition. But like, how about all the other traditions?
Yeah, I've never come across a tradition that doesn't really sort of believe that implicitly. Like deep down,
yeah.
But like, even if you go to like Judaism or Islam or whatever, like they all hinge on you're special and all these other people that cause you issues are going to be punished forever, right? That's what I'm holding on to. That's what's keeping me on the straight and narrow, is an arrogance in that God is going to take care of me like better.
I'll just chime in. I don't think Judaism is like that. Based on, I studied it for a little bit for the last 2 or 3 years, and it didn't come across that way in my studies. Just to chime in there.
The more I've learned about it, I haven't seen that either. But like I know it.
There are countless stories of the Bible where the Hebrews are told to do something very specifically, and they'll be taken care of, and their enemies will be destroyed. And it happens over and over again.
Yeah, for sure. So like Kezi here is like a Jewish guy from the little corner that I very much trust. And he's like, yeah, that's not a Jewish perspective. I mean.
So what it is there's an interpretation of the book that Tim's talking about, propositions. And then there's a fusion of that with what a Jew is, right? And so it's his interpretation of the book being combined with, well, that's what a Jew does, and that's what a Jew believes, right? So,
yeah, everybody hinges on the fact that if they believe what they think they're supposed to believe, they will be considered to be a little bit better than everybody else. It's like, that's sort of the crux of every parable, it's that you want to put yourself in the best position that you can.
Yes, but I'm arguing that is an, call it whatever, that is a projected frame onto the text and not what the texts are actually saying.
So I would argue that, back to my hell example, is that like that doesn't exactly matter. Like what matters is what sort of becomes the reality, right? And my argument was that regardless of what like the actual teaching on hell was, for the past 80 years, it was infernalism, and everybody was okay with that, right? And so like,
yeah, because they didn't want to forgive people because they were always on the right side of the line, or so they thought, right?
Yeah, like I can't imagine a Muslim on planet Earth that thinks they're worse off as a person because they believe in Islam. Right? I can't think of a Christian out there that thinks that they are less loved by God because they believe in Christianity. No, like people want to accumulate good points, right? Like good stuff, good favor among God, which why wouldn't you, right? The Bible is just full of God like spiting people, smiting people, getting jealous, getting angry, wiping people off the face of the earth for one simple mistake, right? Like I would be terrified. Of course I would want to put myself in the best position against this like abusive father character, right? Like that's what living in fear is about. And you know, like how helpful it would be to, let's say, an institution that seeks to grow and grow and grow is to convince an entire population that they're going to burn for eternity unless they.
It sounds like we have something like the atheist perspective, like, which is what you asked for, Luke. Like Tim's blessed us with sharing, because this is what I remember believing this kind of stuff. I've run across people who see religion this way, see the Bible this way, and I've been there. So it's like I'm glad Tim's here. This isn't, but yeah, I would say that's a perspective, you know. Tim's sharing his perspective, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of why we're here. This is what I was talking about with like, this is the remedy to that problem. Because I'm always railing on about institutions. This was part of my deconstruction. That's like what led me to where I am now. Is I mean, I've spoken about this a lot, but like I watched a YouTube video of like a debate between somebody who was promoting annihilationism or conditional immortality against somebody who was like an infernalist. And I mean, I don't even know how I clicked on it. And at that point, I was very Protestant, very sola scriptura. The Bible is our authority. I believe the exegesis, like the people who are the Bible people, right? Which whatever. I've even moved on from that. But like, I listened to that debate, which was like over 2 hours or something. I should go back and find it. And I remember thinking like, holy cow, the annihilationist destroyed this guy on just like biblical texts, just like walking through biblical texts. And so like on the protocol of like how you're supposed to approach truth in the Bible, this guy won the debate, but he has the wrong opinion. He has the wrong perspective. This is not what I've been taught my whole life. And that put me in this liminal place of just like, what the hell is going on? That was a good thing. This is my whole argument against confessionalism. My one like major intellectual thing in this little corner is like confessionalism is bad. So like everything you're saying, like, yeah, this is the mainstream thing that the Far Side comics. This is what everybody believes in America. Yes, but that's because they don't know any better. That's my whole shtick. So like I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, I think the position I'm trying to reveal is that if you were to really look at your beliefs like real carefully, like with almost an inhuman level of honesty, I'm not sure how many of those beliefs wouldn't also be invalidated by the same thing that invalidated, like.
Are you saying me or a person?
I'm just saying like a lot of these religious beliefs aren't in the Bible, right? They have nothing to do with the Bible, right? Like,
well, this is Sam's thing, the Trinity. That's what Sam would say.
I'm just saying, like you said, oh, well, it sounds like you're projecting onto this interpretation of the Bible. Well, who's not, right? Who on planet Earth is not throwing some projection in? And so,
Agreed.
Like, if you're listening to William Lane Craig or whatever, and you like, or Peter Kreeft, and you like what they say, I'm more of a Ravi Zacharias guy, but you know.
Not anymore. He's
not anymore. But like, it's just kind of like I just feel like over and over and over again, I get the sense that like this person believed something before they encountered religion. They then found a religion that aligns with what they already believe, and then they wholeheartedly try to convince everybody that their religion is the way. And it's like, yo, man, you want to keep this 2,000-year game going, or do you want to go to Mars? You know, like that's what I'm.
Right.
That's where
I
I'm
don't
at.
want to go to Mars personally.
Well, but you don't have to do that completely. So Christian, yeah, speak up. And Sherry's here to drop some truth. So, Christian, what's up? What brings you here? You froze up? He looks froze up, Sherry. You better talk.
I missed the last, like, whatever, while I was jumping in here. I don't know. Where are you guys at? Just keep going.
So I think Tim was just saying what belief and what you want to believe is some degree of projection and seeing what you want to see versus what's really there. And like, that's just happening for everybody, which I think is, true to some degree. Like I also preach against objectivism all the time. It's like what you see in here depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. That's one of my favorite things. So like, I agree with you, Is that my mic?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear it clicking? Or
Yeah,
is that my head?
what's that noise?
Somebody's clicking. There it went
That was
away.
Neil.
I can hear you. Well, it must have been who
Neil.
was clicking. Somebody was clicking.
Neil.
I'm so embarrassed.
I think this is also true. This is like my whole. Somebody said earlier that Tim, you must not like the line of like, tell me the God you don't believe in or the hell you don't believe in. I probably don't believe in it either. Because this is true of my Christian Universalism. This is why I had a stream called The Severity of Christian Universalism. Most people that I know, when I talk that I'm a Christian Universalist, they get mad and they're just like, well, like, justice is real. And I'm like, yes. I actually think Christian Universalism is the most severe view on hell. It's just also the most ethical. God is the most good. Love is the most supreme. Like, it's just not denying. It's not denying, George MacDonald, you won't get out until you've paid the last farthing. If you really have to forgive everyone who sinned against you, like I think Grimm said earlier, like Pizzagate makes it hard to not believe in hell. Agreed. Like child molesters are going to have to be reconciled with the people they've molested. How do you think that's going to be for them? Not great. Their evil false self isn't going to like it very much.
They're already in hell.
Agreed. That too.
I don't like to make comments on like what happens after we die. And I think that's like my faith is more grounded in like this, which on the comment from Tim about like, why don't we just get behind going to Mars for meaning? Because I mean, for one, I'm never going to make it to Mars. If I wanted to use my taxes to do that, I could get a little bit of communal meaning as we all can. But like, where I get a lot of meaning is from what happens like in my sphere of life.
Right.
I think, and then, so when I go from heaven to hell now.
Dude, your audio's choppy. Sorry, you're cutting in and out. So I don't know what's going on. You might have to just take out the headphones and roll without them.
Oh, that's way better.
Well, now you're just silent, but he's probably just got to switch his headphones. Yeah, like I completely agree with this. I'm a universalist, but I still believe that God delivers people up to suffer their own consequences. Yeah. I mean, like it wouldn't be loving otherwise. And you wouldn't learn. You wouldn't become who you're supposed to become if you don't have to walk through that transformation, Like it's part of who you are.
I think that a good way to think about it is the verse, all that cannot be shaken shall remain. Right? So like there's a remainer. There, something remains. And something and other things are shaken off of that thing. And I think we know this, like not just in the context of an afterlife, but we know it in the context of our everyday lives, right? Like if we go out in the cold, we'll shake off everything that doesn't help us stay warm. And only the thing that is, you know, going to keep us warm will remain, right? Like this is the thing, we do this. This is a principle that we actually implement, and we know this. So, like, for me, the thing about apokatastasis, which is the reconciliation of all things, is it's really not rocket science. Like, I don't need a big explanation, you know, for apokatastasis. I don't even need to compare it to other things because, and this is personal to me, nothing else reflects the heart of the Father.
Right. Jason and Christian, if you got your audio figured out, I want to hear what you have to say. But Jason, my friend Jason, said this the other day. He's just like, of your children, like, which of your children would you excommunicate? In the sense of just like, you're unredeemable, like you're out, you're gone. And yes, are there times maybe where you elect to exclude them? But that's always, but it's always for their eventual redemption.
Yeah.
Like what loving parent is going to just like, you're completely dead to me, which is why Cal likes to bring up that the father of that Sandy Hook shooter kid or whatever, where he said he's gotten to the point where he thinks he really wishes like his son had never been born.
Right.
Like that's, well, to me, that's the
like
opposite of God.
The prodigal son story is it's so interesting how it's been taken and in my opinion twisted as a story of portraying a person as a human being as something that lives with pigs and shit, when it's actually a story about a man who didn't know who he was. Right?
Yeah.
That's he was the son of the Father. And the Father always knew that. That's why he stood waiting for him to realize it, right? And that's why he never considered anything less than a robe and a party. And, there's no other alternative to the return of the Son, because he is the Son of the Father. And now he knows that. And the other son also didn't know that. Also doesn't know who he is. Because there would be no rivalry, right? If he knew.
Yeah, jealousy.
Yeah. Because you can't diminish that place of being the Son. That's why Jesus can say, when the disciples say to him, who's going to sit at your right hand? There is, there is no right hand. You're all on the right hand, if you want to, put it that way, right? And that question is always like when Tim was talking about everyone thinking that they're pleasing to God above others, is asking that same question. Who's going to sit at your right hand?
Yeah.
Will it be me? Will it be me? Will it be me?
God doesn't show favoritism.
No, because he can't, actually, because that's not what love does.
I want to know what love is. I want you to show me.
I want you to show me.
Yeah, it comes in with the lyrics.
Oh, it's so good. That was one of my first favorite songs of all time, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to what Tim was talking about heaven and hell. Like, can y'all hear okay?
Yeah, you're much better.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, like, I concern myself with a lot of things about the afterlife because it feels like a lot of the rejection and deconstruction is a rejection to hyper focus on the afterlife, like fire and brimstone. And so that's like a lot of the rejection. And, an easy way to break into Lewis is the Great Divorce. And that was for me. And it really just helped me ease my anxieties about. And then that was even about heaven and hell. And that's even where the Harris-Peterson conversation went to early on. And a long time ago in their first, what were those, Pangburn conversations, was about heaven and hell and about suffering. And I'll say this to the point about the Sandy Hook dad. Were you saying that he wishes the kid had never been born because for the kid's sake or for his own sake? Which one was he saying?
Well, that's a great question.
Because I would say it was more for his sake because the suffering that he's going through.
That's the negative take, I guess. I mean, either way, I don't really like it, but one seems to be less self-focused.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then the thing about like the other part Tim talked about, which was about religion in a general sense versus like, well, why don't we get behind going to Mars? And I still think that even though you can find some meaning in that as being a part of this grand human narrative, like I'm never going to be going to Mars, but I mean, it's still a very lofty goal, for whoever, Musk or whoever. I think it's great for our civilization, but it's really hard to find meaning in things that are that at that scale. Like I find so much more meaning in the groups of people I'm with, or in some engagement here, and in my family and so on. So like, I feel like that's, and within that, that's where religious practices, whether you're atheist or Christian or not, are going to be more meaningful. How you structure those relationships that are in your life is really where you're going to get a lot more meaning than getting behind big, huge ideals as the foundation for meaning.
Well, I mean, ultimately what all that is that you talked about is projecting yourself into a future that you cannot know, right?
Both of them are, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. All of them are.
And Jesus, Jesus says, don't do that. Don't do that.
That's why I was thinking of the lilies of the field. And,
right.
And then also Abel, who cries from the soil. To me, I think that's like the same field. And that's why I'm not really worried about who's right and who's wrong, because everybody's doing this all the time. I'll say it, and I'll say it a million times. You could have a church with 1,000 people in it, and there's going to be 4,000 different gods in that church. And that's just how people are.
Did you say there was a church with 1,000 people and 4,000 different gods?
That's probably what it is.
Yes.
No, I find that interesting.
Because it's like what you think from day to day.
Yeah, if that's what you're saying, then what you're really saying is that our conception of God is it's changing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Praise God. I mean, it's like any person in your life. If the narrative or the story you tell yourself or you're projecting onto someone else isn't evolving over time, you're probably not interacting. Your relationship probably sucks, or you're not interacting with a real person.
Well, Simone Weil said our man, my brain's a little slow this morning. We're to be wrestling with God, right? Like this is what we are doing. We're wrestling with God. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I was raised in an environment that really forbade that, right? Don't question, don't wrestle, just grovel, lots of groveling, and be really, grateful that you're one of the lucky ones. It's terrible.
Safe in that locked box.
Well,
Right.
and then there's all other of us who are living in a household where the God was an alcoholic father who would come up behind you while you're eating dinner and hit you on the back of the neck and say, "Pay attention, boy," just for shits and giggles, and then laugh and walk away. And meanwhile, not have any connection. So, like, I guess, and I bring that up, I'm not weaponizing my trauma because I don't think it was very traumatic. But when I think about just how people are, it's like, this is why I think, yeah, Hezzie's right on this brave space deal, but it's also like, give people room to breathe. We're all going to fuck up. And I think having the room to hit the wall is perfect because
Yeah.
you have to know what the edges are in your worldview, and
Well,
that's the only way
that's
you're
what
able to find. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I heard Luke refer to when I first jumped on. He was talking about the U-shaped journey, and that's the utility of the U-shaped journey, right? Bye, Chad. It's hitting the bottom for the purpose of resurrection, which is transformation, right? So I just don't know how you can do it otherwise. Like, and I've been thinking about, there's a quote by an artist /artist named Friedrich Hundertwasser, which is a great hippie name because it means peaceful kingdom 100 waters. And he's quite a famous architect, actually. And I heard the quote from Ian McGilchrist, and it really struck me because he said straight lines are godless. I could read the whole quote, but I won't. Anyway, I've thought a lot about it because straight lines are, in the animal kingdom, predatory, for one thing. And they're also shortcuts, right? And what we do and Luke, you've talked about this too, what we do to understand ourselves is we circumambulate. And I think that's the healthy movement to make, right? Is to circumambulate something. I'm just thinking about prey animals. I have horses, and any animal that's a prey animal has its eyes on the sides of its head, so it has a very large peripheral vision. And whenever it approaches something like water, for example, where it's putting itself at risk, it makes itself vulnerable because predators, they know eventually those animals are going to get thirsty. When they approach it at, they snake up to it. They come at it from angles so that they can see, right? And predators, they just go straight after the thing. And I don't know, I find a lot of ideas about what it means to get yourself into heaven, get yourself to the right hand of God. I find them essentially straight lines. I've always had the idea that they're too simple, like too easy in that sense, right?
I think there's a challenge between God being accessible in a very straightforward way versus what sanctification is, or what that journey looks like. And so the straight lines, like in, ABC gospel or even catechism or, Eucharist or something, those are straight lines in a way, through the church.
Yeah.
But the life surrounding that is not, and I think those are the tensions, because I think on one hand, God is easily accessible, but our prodigalness, or even our first sonness, whatever it is very crooked and very self-deceiving and all those things. And so it's like maybe in like a rhythm of worship, like here's my life, and then boom, here's my life, kind of that. And it's kind of an orienting more than it is just like a straight thing. And when you said that, what went through my mind was like, well, I was thinking about, well, yeah, if you look at the Bible, there's like no straight lines in the Bible. But then like I had one, and I was like, well, maybe you could say in some ways Jesus was a straight line. Like,
yeah, but it wasn't obvious. Like it's
No.
obvious in retrospect, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, it was
Yes.
definitely not obvious. People are like, no, you got to do it like this. No, you got to do it like that. No, who's going to sit at your right hand, and
Yeah.
who's your most beloved, and
Yeah.
all that
It was,
stuff.
those relationships were the same as we still have.
And it was totally confusing to the followers of Christ. It was totally confusing. It was not a straight line.
No, I was talking about Jesus himself.
For him, it was a straight line. Yeah, he was completely oriented to God, right?
Yes.
To the good.
I don't even know, like this, well, I'm probably going to need to get going, so I'll let Sherry take over, but I don't even know about that. Like this is where I, like somebody said that the other day. I don't think we can know, because that's like his own internal experience, I suppose. But if he even had that kind of self-awareness thing that we had, I'm not totally sure, but Jesus learned obedience by what he suffered. So like, what does it mean to learn obedience, where like, as George Don says, will and obedience become one under love? Well, Jesus learned that at least in a testing way, in the same way that we do, so like, I don't know. Or somebody was saying like, somebody just brought this up in a conversation, like even Jesus on the cross, I think he had the kind of faith that Abraham had, where it was just like sacrificing Isaac. Like, I don't know what's going to happen over this, but I trust God. I think Jesus actually had that.
Does it say that he learned?
I think so. I'll look up the exact verse, but yeah.
Because I know it talks about him being made perfect through his sufferings. Complete. Right? But I think
so
those are
Hebrews 5:8.
I think it's Colossians that said we actually complete Christ's sufferings. Is that what you're talking about?
So the one I'm thinking of, it does say that, but Hebrews 5:8 says, so in English, it's although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things which he suffered.
Okay, so he learned obedience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know if I can articulate what I'm thinking, but I'm not sure that's exactly what we would think it is.
Well, that's highly likely. Again, it's that like projecting
like,
and wanting and
For me, Maximus talks about the gnomic and the natural will, right?
Yes.
And the natural will, or you could say the natural inclination, is to be oriented to God. The gnomic will is when you fall into duality and you have to choose between two things.
Yes.
And you deliberate. And so, according to Maximus, Christ didn't have a gnomic will. He followed a natural will. So he was naturally inclined to be oriented to God. That was his natural. He was forward facing, right? Facing God's face. And so, but how do you understand obedience if you haven't suffered. This is how I think the writer of Hebrews is. I think this is what they're talking about. You know, like obedience requires submission to something, and in this world, I think we're mostly submitted to suffering, right? If you obey, and I'm just thinking out loud, so help me out. But if you obey, you're making some kind of a compromise. You're not doing something else, right?
That's the difference. It's not suffering necessarily. That's sacrifice.
Yeah, but John Vervaeke talks about suffering as a loss of agency. And so if you're obeying someone else, you're giving up your own agency, which would immediately induce a state of suffering, right? According to Vervaeke.
Maybe if the consequence, I don't know, but maybe if the consequences cause a type of suffering.
I mean, we're talking about suffering, and everybody's thinking of degrees of suffering right now. But let's just eliminate the degrees and just understand it as a loss of agency is suffering. And I think that that's actually really right. When you feel like your agency, like you can't get out of something, you're suffering. Right?
Yeah,
so
you're trapped.
Right? Like you're going, I have to get up at 6 every morning, I have to set my alarm, and I have to go to work for someone else. That's a loss of agency, and it induces suffering to a certain extent. Even though you're going to get a paycheck and be able to pay a mortgage and feed your children and all the rest of it, right? Something like that. I can't, just so everybody knows in the chat, I can't show any comments because I'm not on my desktop, so I'm just.
Well, I think that the parts about, I think that's true. What you're talking about the agency. Yeah, I understand what you're saying now. I guess what it was causing me to think about was the fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom, where had you feared the Father in a trusting way, like feared the consequences of what it means to be human, that you can avoid suffering.
No.
It's that difference between learning from other people's mistakes or learning from your own, how you gain wisdom that way. That's kind of what that was.
Well, I mean, that's basically how a child develops. That's child development 101. I had my grandson here, my 8-month-old grandson here over the holidays, and his mom is living in a world. She's a career person. She has a really good job, and she interacts with a lot of other career type moms, and they're buying, like she showed me a message from a friend who just bought a helmet for her little guy because he started standing up on things, right? And she asked me, like, is this a good idea? And I said, no, it isn't, because every time he falls, he's not going to get hurt. He needs to get hurt so he doesn't fall anymore, right? So put a helmet on him and create a being that just walks around falling into stuff, falling over freely. And then one day, and I said this to her, he gets his heart broken and he can't recover because he's never been hurt. He needs to get hurt.
gonna have to roll. Thanks for our first stream, everyone.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Well, I guess it's just down to us.
I guess so.
I think there's a link in the chat, and oh, you know what? Maybe I should. Do you want to stay on longer?
I don't really have any more to say.
Okay.
I didn't really have much to say at all today, I guess, but you know, I have a lot of myself. I allow myself one time per week to get on.
Oh yeah.
So this was my time, and now you won't see me again.
For the rest of the week?
For the rest of the week, yeah.
Mhm.
I am concerned with the whole being a profile.
Being a profile?
The profilicity thing.
What do you mean, like a persona?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, you can't be a persona if you don't project a persona. You just have to be like me and just say whatever you think.
Yes. But I know that I'm the type of person that if this becomes something I do a lot, I'll play the game. I'm a game player.
You know, I thought that too when I started out. I thought, like when Nate invited me to be part of Grail Country, my first reaction was, oh no, I can't project myself out there because of all the things you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But then this other part of me wanted to learn. And I knew that if I didn't participate in the conversations or read the books or fall down and hit my head, right, make mistakes, that I wasn't going to learn. So I said yes. And I did go through, in the beginning, I went through a time of trying to figure out who I am on a platform like this.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I don't even know. I can't be anything else but who I am. Why am I trying to, I would be a terrible actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've discovered that I am a very terrible actor. That was not a fun experience.
I'm not good at it. I tried. I tried, in a couple of high school plays or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Atrocious.
Yes.
Because I just end up being myself. So, and it was very freeing to come to that place and just be myself. And then I get to reap the benefits of having great conversations with great people and reading great books and talking to someone like Nate, who's just like a storehouse of information. So, yeah. Fear not.
All right. I'll work on it. I'm not wise, so why should anyone listen to what I say? But I guess you don't get to be wise unless you practice.
I'm not either, and I know that I kind of, there's this thing. People think that that's what I am, but I don't feel like I am. And I think everyone should take what I say with a grain of salt. Honestly.
Yeah.
But like Christ's disciples are so interesting to just see as let's say a collective image of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
All the different personalities. And one of them that I thought about more than others was Judas. Because what was interesting to me about Judas was that everybody knew that he was stealing from the treasury.
Mm-hmm.
He was stealing money. There's a verse,
yeah.
I can't remember where, one of the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
And yet Jesus gave him that job.
Yeah.
He said, here, you hold the purse. And he was stealing from it.
Yeah.
Right? So, what I gleaned from that, from understanding it like that, was that Jesus is always kind of putting our weaknesses, our shortcomings right in our face and saying, here, how are you gonna deal with that? But you have to deal with it. You can't avoid it, right? So anyway, that's my advice.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll sign off. I'm gonna leave this, and then I'm gonna have to run down and end the stream on my desktop. But
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Nice to talk again.
Absolutely. I'll see you next week.
Yeah. Have a good week.